it is ultimately important for you to look at your goals, truly what you want to do in your life, and then look at the people who you spend the most time with in your life and figure out if that lines up.
Welcome, everybody. You missed an amazing introduction before, but we recorded it. We'll send that out as a separate B-reel. Thank you for joining us. This is the very first, and I'm absolutely privileged that Brian let me do this, the very first Morning Perspective Takeover episode. And this episode number 139, I think you said. So you got through 138, hosting it yourself, and then bringing the big guns. I get it. No, I'm kidding. So the genesis of this whole thing, my name's Todd. Most of you probably know Brian. And we're thrilled to have Kristen Daly with us today from KDaly Communications. I'll tell you quickly why we decided to put this show together. We had a Zoom call about 2 weeks ago that was supposed to be a quick 15-minute introduction. And we got talking about culture and messaging and that sort of stuff within your leadership teams, which Brian and Kristen are both experts at. And it turned into about a 90-minute call. And we just had a blast with it and really wish we had recorded that we could have shared it with everybody, with the school, with all our contractors and Kristen's network and all that. So we decided to give it another try, do it on the Morning Perspective here. So I want to take a second and introduce, if you're a regular viewer of the show, which most of you probably are, but who knows, Brian, I might have cousins watching. I might have brought you some audience. We don't know. Brian Hess. Brian, will you take about 60 seconds, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do within your organizations?
Yeah, sure. So Brian Hess, I am a father of four, husband, and proud business owner. So I've got the Pavement Group, president and CEO of the Pavement Group, and founder of Top Contractor School. So we're asphalt and concrete contractor. We, function nationwide, and Top Contractor School is really a company that was founded to support the subcontractors and everybody within our industry in being able to grow their businesses and kind of keep up with the times with all this technology stuff and the evolution of sales and all that type of stuff. So but happy to be here, man, and honored to have you take this over for us, and look forward to this conversation with Kristen. If it's half as exciting as the one that was off the air, you guys are in for a treat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's hope we can match that intensity this time. Thanks, Brian. So Kristen Daly, she's the CEO of KDaly Company, has a KDaly Communications, really an expert in messaging. She does a lot of PR work, helps people with speech writing, works with some of the biggest CEOs in all of Massachusetts, probably New England. Now that you're Zooming, you can work anywhere, right?
Zooming and booming, man. Yeah.
Zooming and
I love
booming.
live TV.
But you've got a fascinating background as well. So would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Kristen Daly, as you said, owner of KDaly Communications. I started out in broadcast television about 30 years ago. Spent a lot of time in the Boston market on the air, behind the scenes, went into PR. And what I missed so much about being a reporter and being a news anchor was telling stories that I really wanted to tell. And what I didn't like about PR was sometimes I was having to sell something I didn't believe in, and it just didn't feel right. So when I developed my company, I really wanted to maintain the storytelling piece of what I loved, but help people find their voice and help them inspire people. What I had found is that 20 years ago, CEOs were these scary people at the end of a boardroom table, and no one was listening. And I always believed that leadership was all about listening. And so I wanted to bring my special brand of communication to CEOs in a bunch of different industries. My tagline is, what are you trying to say, and does anybody give a shit? So it's really how it's my test. When a client says, I think we need to work with you, I say, what are you trying to say, and does anybody give a shit? And most of them cock their head, and I say, no, really, it's a question. And why should someone care about what you're doing, what you're selling, what your business is all about? So that is where it all started.
I love it. And you really don't pull any punches. That's what I noticed about you the first time I met you. I met Kristen. We had a mutual client, and Kristen was doing some of this work with them. I got to sit in on it, and she beat the crap out of me for about an hour and a half. It's basically what happened, but it was.
And you liked it.
I loved it. It was great. It was such a productive day. And sometimes, as business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs, you don't want to face those brutal facts that maybe you're not doing everything as well as you can. I love the companies like the company that we worked with, Fraser Engineering, who's amazing people, always trying to get better. Yeah. And those folks that say, what could I do a little bit better? How do I, rely on an expert like a Kristen or like a Brian to come in here and be vulnerable and help me do, because you're not going to be good at everything in your business. You're just not. There's a reason you're a leader. There's a reason you got to where you are. You're just not going to be good at absolutely everything. So I think
the most my favorite those that I work with are, and people for that matter, are okay with being coached. They're okay with knowing that you may know more than they do, and they're fine with it. And it's like you said, it's not always comfortable to hear criticism, but it's really cool when you learn something from someone who has a different perspective and who brings something different to the table. And when I work with someone who understands that what they do is really important and they're really smart, and what I do is really important and I'm smart, and together we just get better and stronger. That's my favorite interaction when I work with a client.
Sure. Oh, that's awesome. Brian, what do you think the biggest challenge is to getting someone engaged in coaching, to get them to open their minds or open their hearts to the message that you have?
I think the first thing, to engage people in coaching on any level is to first and foremost is to gain their trust, right? To have them understand that, what they're about to learn, what you're about to discuss is going to be mutually beneficial, right? That everybody involved in that conversation is going to learn something. Because what I've found is that usually the response from you coaching someone has nothing to do, the immediate response when you're coaching someone new, like in Kristen's situation, or if I'm coaching contractors, has nothing to do with you necessarily. It has to do with how they've been coached in the past. And the whole entire culture of coaching in general, or feedback in the way that it's delivered in business, is not honest. Most people run around the apple tree for 4 hours before they tell you what they're actually trying to say. It's covered in so much sugar that they don't even understand what it really is supposed to taste like. And so it's kind of gaining people's trust that, number one, you know what you're talking about and that you're an expert at what you're doing. You're not just shooting from the hip here trying to give somebody advice. Because the other thing, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday and said, the confusion in the market today is that people are overwhelmed with inaccurate information. So there's so much information out there that people are consuming, but is it the right information? And so you have to gain their trust that you're an expert. And then secondly, that you're delivering them something that's actually going to be valuable to them, right? That they should trust what you're saying because you're genuinely trying to help them. I think that's the biggest thing in today's world is there's so much noise that you got to be able to cut through it and gain people's trust quickly to be a good coach.
Yeah, that's really well said.
I can add to that for 2 seconds. I think that part of that gaining trust is having the person across from you realize that you don't know everything. Here's what I'm an expert in, and here's what I don't have a clue about. And I'm not going to try to be everything. I'm not going to be your business coach, your communications consultant, and something else, and your accountant. I mean, that's when everyone tries to be all things to all people, that's when I get scared. And I will very honestly sit in a room and say, that is way out of my lane. And I got a guy who might be able to help you, but it's not me. And I think that we're moving towards being able to say those 3 words, I don't know, especially now that you can't make it up, especially where we are now. So saying, I don't know, and that's a great question, is some of the strongest leadership, and the way you really do establish yourself as an expert is saying, this is what I know, this is what I don't have a clue about.
Well said. So it's that vulnerability, and then, like you said, Brian, that trust to find somebody that you are willing to put your trust into and let lead you and guide you. Is that saying everybody that you see on these memes and stuff? Apparently, the world's being driven by memes now, but that we're all in the same storm, just not all in the same boat. But the reality is, you're in a boat, and if you don't know how to drive it, find someone that does. Right?
Yep, no doubt.
I just made that up. All right, you can knit that into a pillow. Okay, let's jump into some questions. Some other questions that I had here for you. So how do you, and I want to start with you on this one, Kristen, how do you start the conversation with the leadership team about culture, about messaging? What are the first things that you get into to help them discover maybe what their purpose is or their core values or whatever it is that's important to help them?
The first thing I usually do is I ask them what they know. Do they know their core values? Can you go around the table and each tell me the core values of this company, and not just tell me a word. Everyone wants to say authentic, trustworthy, service related. Okay, and then what? Mm-hmm. And most people look at me like, what do you mean, and then what? Well, it's a word. If it's not a belief, then it's just words on a paper. So what are your core values? And then I do literally ask, what are you trying to say to your customers, and does anyone care? And it sounds offensive, and it's actually meant to, because I want you to come back to me with the value that you bring to the marketplace, the value in your industry. And I also go into a second set of questions, which is I call role and reason. I understand who you are. I understand that you own XYZ, but what's your reason? And it goes into the why. So I know what your business card says, but why do you do that? Why are you valuable, and why is the company valuable to the world? And that just gets a conversation started with some of the brand vocabulary that means something to a company. And then we get to talk about it and figure out who thinks one word is bullshit and who thinks one word is really important, and how do we find a way to have everybody get on board. And we unearth some cool stuff about companies that you didn't even know was there. And I think when people understand their reason for being at a company and the reason they're valuable, they start to be more of a team player because they understand where they fit.
Right on. That's awesome. What would you say to that, Brian? What's the, like, kind of peeling back the onion when you want to get past that surface of just, yeah, we're a great service company, or we're the best in the world at X, really get in the heart of the company. What would you suggest?
We'll give them a look into our last conversation, because we had a lengthy bit on this one during the last conversation. And I think that a lot of companies, you know, to Kristen's point of really trying to dig in, what you find is that people love to use buzzwords that may or may not actually really identify them. And so it sounds good. It's really good marketing, but do you actually stand for it? You know, one of the things, and Todd, you can attest to this, that we say inside the Pavement Group is that, you know, everybody's got values and a good mission and things that they stand for, until they might lose some money, they might lose some time. Then what do you really stand for? And those are really your core values that you are willing to risk everything to stand for. It's not the stuff that you put on paper that sounds really good and might attract employees from the outside, but then they get to your company and they figure out this isn't anything as advertised. And so this is what creates turnover and creates really bad situations for companies, not just in the construction industry, but all industries, because what you claim to stand for, your identity to the public, does not align with how you run your company or the values at which you operate naturally. And so, you know, I think that it's really important. And this is an exercise. We just went through it at the Pavement Group with you the other day, Todd. I was like, you know, let's talk about and let's be open about what we are, who we are, what we stand for. And then listen, there's always things that maybe you want to stand for that you don't stand for today. But let's be really honest, and not to use buzzwords so I don't get in trouble from Kristen, but let's be really genuinely transparent about where we're at and what do we stand for, and then what do we want to stand for? Because it's in most companies, and Kristen, I'd love to hear your opinion here. Usually the list of values when I start working with them versus what they say versus what it is not always identical.
Very much so. Most of the time it's not, unfortunately. And, you know, I always say, if you have to dust off your core values out of some handbook that sat on a shelf for 5 years and lives in a vacuum, the CEO needs to be able to articulate those core values. And so does the person who works in the mailroom. It's that important. And it can't just live in a manual, and it can't just be words on a page, because as I've been saying, your core values don't change in a crisis. In fact, they should rise up, and they should identify you as a culture and a company. So as I've been coaching some of my CEOs through this recent crisis, your core values look pretty and great during a comfortable time. But if they don't match up in times of chaos and you're floundering, then you really got to go back to who you are as a company and make sure everybody is on board. It's crucial. And communicating those values with each other. You don't talk enough within, you know, everyone's doing their job. Have these meetings, do the work.
Sure.
I would add one thing to that too, Todd. I think that those values, because, you know, we've grown from a very small company, couple people, and then, you know, you start to grow. They should be identical. There's going to be a lot of people that watch this that are smaller companies, maybe 1, 2, 3 people. And those values are something you have to hold yourself to too, right? If you are a single owner and you're operating by yourself, it's still equally as important for you to identify what those values are, because when you start to bring people in as you grow your business, that's how you do it. We've had conversations in the last handful of days here about things within our business, and do they align with where we're going, what our mission is, what our values are. And that is how we make all of our decisions. It's based on those things that we genuinely believe at our core. It's not based on the emotional responses we have to things day to day. It's based on where are we going and what are we doing and what do we want to stand for? What do we want to be known by?
No, you nailed it. You know, in EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, they sum it up. Your core values are something that you hire, fire, and review based on, right? Those 3 things. So it gives you a little bit of a framework, because a lot of business owners or leadership teams will say, all right, we figured out our core values. Now what? What do we do with them? How do we get everybody engaged, right? But I want to take a step back. How far down do you go, Kristen? And if it's okay, I was going to bring up a couple of your visuals here for the system that you used for the wordsmithing and messaging and that sort of thing. Is that okay? Do I have your permission?
Yeah. No,
okay.
Go ahead.
Put the kids away. There's some language in this, just so you know, folks.
There's always language, and I'm involved, and I apologize ahead of time.
Now, when you were on the news desk, did they let you swear, or is this like a whole new
No,
freedom?
it was my biggest fear, and thank baby Jesus that I did not say anything awful. But yeah, there were bets on when the first time was going to happen and how bad it was going to be. So
That's unbelievable. Yeah, I love it. So, you know, figuring out the mechanics of how you get it done. Because like you said, Brian, it's an accountability for the whole company, but you got to get people bought in. And I think, and again, I'll be interested to hear what you guys think, but I think from the beginning, when you're starting to develop these core values and your core focus and your mission and all that stuff, you got to get as many people involved as possible, right? So you have the buy-in, so everybody has a say in it. So for the purpose of this, I love the SHIT, I'll call it. I don't swear, right? I don't freaking swear. Okay, Kristen. The shit method here. So talk a little about how you came up with it.
Well, it came from my tagline, and I would say, what are you trying to say? And then does anyone give a shit? And I was like, wait, that word, I have a lot of ways my brain works with mnemonics is a new word that I learned. I thought they were acronyms. What do I know? But when I looked at the word and I thought, what are the 4 things that you should be doing that is just DNA? And one is just show up and do the work. Yep. Show up and transparent. We don't want to have too many buzzwords, but show up and be ready to do the work every day. Hard sell, hell no. If you have to hard sell me, then you don't believe in the product enough. You don't believe in your company enough. If you have something really interesting to say, like I was saying to Todd earlier, you don't have to have a good memory when you tell the truth.
Right. Where did you get that line from?
From Judge Judy. Judge Judy. Yeah. Inspire me, don't impress me is one of my favorite things, because I believe a lot of people go in with their resume first and they tell you their credentials and they tell you what they've done. And I want you to tell me what's going to make me better. Remember your audience. Remember who you're talking to. Inspire someone with something they may not know or something they didn't know they were good at. Remember who you're talking to. And then tell the truth, which seems incredibly basic. But when you tell the truth, the facts are the facts. And yes, we can spin them, but you never get caught in a sales pitch when you're telling the truth about your product and your company. And that should live in the messaging. That should live in what I call the cocktail conversation of every company, where you should be able to sit in the backyard with a beer, having a burger with somebody, and tell them exactly what you do and why you do it. And that's not a pitch. That's just the truth. But it's hard to develop.
Sure.
So giving a shit really does mean something.
It sure does. And then you have the KDaly code. I love this because I like something that I like easy. I'm not a real bright guy. Something that I can wrap my mind around, look at it. It just makes sense. Would you mind walking us through this?
So yeah, this was developed over 30 years of my communications career. And I wanted to try and develop something that you could literally check a box and know that you have solid messaging, that you really have done the work. And when I put this all together, it looked like a chemistry formula, and it's not chemistry, it's communication. So the F1 is the first impression. Everybody knows about first impressions, but really it is how you show up. It's how you show up in a room. It's how you show up and speak to people. The C's are clarity, confidence, and connect. Clarity is clarity within the message, what you're saying, clarity with, especially now in these Zoom calls, where your voice is clear, where you're speaking loud enough, where you're finishing your sentences. The confidence piece is knowing your stuff. It doesn't mean arrogance. Confidence is not arrogance. Confidence is understanding that you're able to come off the page and tell the story of who you are and what your company stands for. Connection is knowing your audience. It's being able to have a real connection, make it not just about you. Truly, any public speaking and any message should be about the audience. The P's are prepare, practice, and perform. I believe in a lot of preparation. I think you should rehearse things, not to the point where they're scripted, but to the point where they're in the DNA of a company and in each employee's heads. Practice means that you sit with each other and you go over these messages and you figure out what makes sense, how they're landing, and perform. Again, in the world of Zoom, you have to amp up your game a little bit more. You have to come with a little bit more energy. And there is such a thing as resting Zoom face. When you're looking out at someone and they're looking back either with their finger up their nose or they're not paying attention, you're responsible for that.
Right.
Meaningful, mindful, and memorable. Have whatever you're saying have some sort of meaning. If it's just a sales pitch, no one needs to hear it. There's too much noise out there. Mindful is, what does your client, your customer need from you? What are you talking about and what do they need? And memorable, they should be able to know after you've talked for 30 minutes, for 20 minutes, for 10 minutes, there's something they remember about what you said that felt specifically designed to touch them. So that leaves a lasting impression. So sometimes I teach just the code as an exercise, because you really do start to unearth what's important in messaging. And this is 30 years of me trying to have articulate, meaningful conversations and not waste people's time.
Sure. That's awesome. Just so a proven process that obviously you've used to have success with a lot of your clients. It's neat. And Kristen, how can, I'm not ending the interview, but just while we're talking about that, this is what Kristen does with her firm, and she's very, very good at it. I know there's a lot of people in Brian's network and my network that would probably love to have some help with this. So how do people get a hold of you?
www.kdalyco.com, KDalyco.com.
Okay.
And my website is pretty straight and to the point. You know exactly who I am when you go to the website. You understand my language, how I work, my brand. I'm very no nonsense for a reason. It's the only way I know how to work. Okay. I tried before to be a little bit more corporate and buttoned up and use the buzzwords and the jargon that I thought were interesting in the industry. And I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And it's because you do have to be yourself and you do have to believe in what you're talking about before anybody else will. So
that's why you made the pivot, just to get out of the box.
I shifted. In these uncertain times, no. And pivot, let's talk about, pivot's not a bad word, but when it's overused, think about that. If you're pivoting, you're running around and you keep going around in circles. So I've been really playing with the language of what we're dealing with now and you know, back to the new normal, pivot. I think that we live life with a different perspective. Instead of getting back to the new normal, let's move forward with new perspective, because I don't know what normal, to me, normal's a weird word anyway. So if we get it in our head that we're moving forward with a different perspective, it's so much more thoughtful and it's actually more hopeful than going back to the new normal. I sit and play with these words constantly, but I think there should be some intentionality on how we look to the future. So moving forward with new perspective is, I think, a great way to look at it.
That's awesome. Thank you. And thank you for going through that presentation. That is super helpful. You know, one thing you said the first time I met you, Kristen, was that words matter. And that's something that really stuck with me. It's kind of a simple statement, but when you really kind of think about that and meditate on it a little bit, they really, really do. Because it's, everybody takes it differently, right? Everybody's going to get a different reaction to what you're saying to them. And being intentional is so important in that respect, especially as a leader, especially when everybody in your organization, you got 2 people, you got 100 people, you got 100,000 people are looking up to see what that message is. Those words matter. And that's something that I just appreciate that you shared that with you. It might have been just something that you were saying, but it really
No, I say it constantly that words do matter.
Something that you were just saying. I just meant in the moment.
No. But I'm such a communications geek. I love to dissect the words and think what word could fit better here that feels more, has more meaning to it. And when I'm helping CEOs build messaging, especially now, what is your intention for the message? What is the information and what's the implied action on the other end? So why are you sending the information, the email, the marketing piece? What is the intention? Really think about that. And that gets your brain going. What is the actual information? What are you giving someone that's useful?
Sure.
Is there anything useful?
Yeah.
And what is the intended action on the other end? What are you delivering, or what is the expectation that you want from the recipient? And when you put your 3 things together, it gives you a nice roadmap. And people ask me constantly, how frequently should we be communicating with customers? And I say, ask yourself, intention, information, action. If you have those 3 things checked off, then you have something that deserves to be in somebody's inbox. If not, don't do it.
Right. That's great. So Brian, you work with a lot of contractors across the country, and you see, again, different sizes and different levels of success and different ways that these companies are built. What would you say you see where good messaging, translates into good culture and really permeates the whole company? How do you give me an example of that? It doesn't have to be a specific company that you see, and then also kind of how you connect the dot to how that really permeates the company.
Yeah, I think, number one, there's some characteristics of leaders that produce this type of messaging. And so, one of those characteristics is, in my opinion, is well studied, right? Somebody that is either well read, well thought out, like Kristin saying, words matter. They're very intentional, and they are able to block out the noise that exists out there because, let's be honest, we have access today to more information, to more what I refer to as noise than ever before. And sometimes what happens in today's world is that people become almost addicted to that information. Like they're trying to learn so much that they never get to that point of implementation. And so I think that taking that step back and really, I'm a big proponent of having some quiet time in your life every day. Like I try to get 30 minutes of just me and my thoughts every day. Like, who am I? Because who I am today is very different than who I was a week ago, hopefully, very different than who I was when I started this company, and everybody around you should be evolving. And so I think that, the characteristics of those companies start with the leadership, right? So not just one person, but a multitude of those leaders and what they put together that becomes believable or not believable to their people. Because, what you say you believe is ultimately checked by other people. It's not something that you can say, well, this is what I believe, and that just becomes a fact. It has to be verified by other people. And so what you see a lot of times is that companies put out what I call a marketing pitch. And again, it goes back to, does that marketing pitch actually align? And so that's a question that I think people becoming well studied on both themselves and other human beings to understand and flush out their own bullshit. One of the things that I say in business and especially in sales is there is nothing more dangerous in the world of business and sales than starting to believe your own bullshit. So you can tell yourself something that's not true, and you don't have people around you to check you, and you don't have people around you that kind of flush that out for you, and you start to believe that, and you don't have somebody like Kristin or a team around you that will say, does anybody actually care, right? Does anybody believe what you're saying? And those are the characteristics of not just construction companies, but every company out there starts to take on a false culture or a false identity because there's not something there that is checking them. The best companies have people that are there constantly reevaluating the things that you believe, and are we living by these things? Like you're saying, Todd, the how you hire, fire, and evaluate every decision should be lining up with those things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Again, what the beauty of what I get to do as a consultant is come in and call bullshit. And I have no risk other than to be honest. And at first, most of the time, people take a step back. But then when they realize I'm not doing it because it's a sport for me, I'm doing it because it's actually useful for you. And when they start to understand, when you unearth some of the gems that you didn't even know were there, the crap goes away automatically. And it can be uncomfortable to have somebody call you out on your business and how you're doing things. And it doesn't mean I'm right. It just means I've prompted a thought that maybe you think about something differently, take some steps to change things for the better, and become a better company because of it. So there is that not calling out just because you can. It's because there's a reason for it. And having those people in your company, in your life that check you when you need it is really important. I got a house full of them right now.
Right. And don't, to business leaders, don't hire a consultant if you're not ready, because there's nothing worse. Like you said, Chris, the job that we're being brought in to do is, to be honest, there's two kinds of consultants. You've got the owner's consultant that's going to destroy your company because they're just building a team to tell you the rest of everybody else what they're doing wrong. And they're just a cheerleader for the owner. And I've seen that. And then there's the ones that are vulnerable and they get beat up probably worse than the rest of the team. Because, if you own the company, everything good, you probably created. Everything bad, you definitely created, right? So having that mentality when you bring someone in, let them do what they do. You're hiring a consultant, hiring someone like Kristen, someone like Brian, they're very good at what they do. Let them do it. Don't get in their way. And if you're thinking about bringing them in just to control a little bit, it always goes sideways. That was great feedback. Kristen, what would you say is the first step a leadership team should take towards building their message, building, the mission statement? What term, actually, let me take a step back. What term do you like the best there? Mission statement feels very Jerry Maguire. Is there another term?
I hate it. I say, what's your promise?
Promise.
What is your promise?
Okay.
What's your promise to your employees, and what's your promise to your customer? And this is where my philosophy is, I don't think that internal and external messaging should live separately. I think messaging is messaging, and whatever you say inside the walls of your company should be what the public is able to hear as well, because you get stuck in the sales jargon. And again, this is sort of 20 years ago and it's changing for the good, I think. But the promise to me says, what do I promise that I will do my very best to deliver, not only to the customer, but to my employee, to every single person that has a touch on my existence because we've connected. What is my promise? And to me, the mission, it's dated. And I think it falls flat. And I think it seems like an exercise in business that has to be done. And everybody writes some crap about, we're a service results driven. No kidding. But what is your promise? And that to me is how I go back with my own company, and I try to remember, what have I promised to do, and am I delivering? And I have to check myself on that. And when I go into a company, I ask them what their promise is. And again, they look and go, what? We have a mission statement. I say, great, articulate it to me. Take it off the page and put it in a conversation. And when you can't do that, when I switch it and say, what's your promise? That changes the language. And that's, again, when words really matter. Sure.
So a little bit of psychology there too, that you're making a promise. You're not just saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. You're saying, I promise to do this.
And and it feels like a commitment, because it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I like that. Brian, anything that you interject there?
I just wrote a whole bunch of notes down on that one. That was good. So what I wrote down is this. It's not just a promise, but I think it's important for people to realize it's what I promise no matter what. Okay. No matter what the cost.
Yeah.
What the inconvenience, or what, you know what I mean? It's what we stand for no matter what.
Yeah.
And I would say that, and this was, again, part of our last conversation, is mission statement is viewed the way that it's viewed because nobody actually takes it serious. Most people farm out the creation of it. And so nobody takes it serious. So it's not the word pivot or balance or let's think outside the box. People think of those as cliche because most people throw that stuff around. What's that?
Nimble.
Yeah, nimble. I want to be nimble. It's people use those terms, they overuse them, and they don't actually realize what they're saying. They just they think that they sound smart, or that they sound like they know what they're talking about. And so people who really, want to use those words intentionally, they become watered down. So mission statement is one of them. One of the things that I wrote down here as a reminder is, like, in the world of social media, I'm a big believer in social media and content creation. I think that content is what allows people the opportunity to actually see your promise. Because if you are making content, and it's not about making one video and putting that out and saying, this is who we are. It's about, what do you produce every day? Who are you every single day? Because it's easy to say, I am this, and put a video out that's really well produced, and people say, okay, cool, that looks like a great company. But if you are all the time producing content, speaking the same language, you're not doing that if you're not living it, because you're going to get called out in a public forum on social media. And so people, the word social proof or social trust comes from creating some level of visibility into your company, and aligning, having your mission out there or your promise out there, and then showing people that you actually live by it.
Right.
And
That's
don't
huge.
promise what you can't deliver. I mean, it really keeps you in check, because, like Brian said, it's a promise no matter what. So those deliverables, to put another word out there that I can't stand, have to be there no matter what the situation. And if the promise should hold water no matter what.
Well said. Right on. All right. So last question I have, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, what's going on right now. Cinco de Mayo. No, I'm kidding. About what's going on in the world right now, and how businesses and leadership teams and everybody, I mean, your world got blown up overnight. It just is so different. People are scrambling to figure out exactly how they're going to operate in the future. There's so much uncertainty out there. There's such a need for good messaging through unorthodox ways, right? Getting it out to the troops who might be working remotely or might be furloughed right now, or whatever it is. And I'm sure that message sounds a lot different. So Kristen, what are you sharing with your clients right now to help them get through this? So again, we're talking about CEOs of big companies, some medium and small size companies that are trying to communicate with their teams, make everybody know that it's going to be all right, feel like it's going to be okay, but this is the change and this is how we do it, and we all stay, synergistically connected. What are you sharing, if you wouldn't mind giving us a couple minutes of that?
Well, again, it goes back to truth. If you can't guarantee it's all going to be okay, then don't say it. Say what you know that day to be true. And right now, the beginning of this was, I have it broken down into kind of 3 layers of stages of communication. And it really is it goes with my crisis communication formats as well. But we started off, and the message from CEOs had to be care and concern, the acknowledgement that this is happening. Your safety is important. And that message is slowly becoming old, because we all know you care. We all know we're in this together. We all know these are unprecedented times. Now, what do you got for me? So we're moving into the phase of truth and transparency. So truth and transparency are the hard conversations. The hard conversations about, we don't know financially where this is going. We don't know who has jobs. These are the awkward, hard conversations that CEOs are having to deliver in a way that is honest yet empathetic. So it's a very tricky balance when you hit the truth and transparency phase, and you still have to echo that we have care and concern, but here's the facts, Jack.
Yeah.
This is the way it's moving. And then the third phase throughout any crisis is the rebuilding and the reinventing of our previous messaging. And we don't want to go too far from who we were, but we do have to have perspective as we move on. So what are those messages looking forward? And do we have the bandwidth to create them? Do we have enough fact to be able to continue? So right now, I feel like we're right on the edge of care and concern and truth and transparency. And we're sort of going like this. And I found that a lot of my CEOs are getting a little lazy in their language because they're tired. They've been saying the same thing, and they're getting a little too loose and saying, it's all going to be okay. And well, no, back it up. Back it up.
Sure.
We don't know that. So my job is to check them and say, what is truth today? How can we be transparent without being fearful, creating chaos, fact versus fear? And how can we try to move on to what the future may or may not bring? But that's all perspective. So I'm really trying to guide people to just be careful with their language, to have that intention, information, and action when they say something, and to be mindful of who they're speaking to, because you get caught up in the CEO bubble where I'm running a company. No, you're leading people. And this is an incredible opportunity to be a tremendous leader. Yeah. And it's also an incredible opportunity to screw up really bad. Yeah. So I, as I've said before, I think this thing will unearth some of the most creative, innovative, and incredibly accomplished people we will have seen in our lifetime. And I think that it will bury the fakers. And I want to be on the side of the innovative and creative people who believe in what they're saying and want to do something that's bigger than themselves. That's why I do what I do. And it may sound sort of profound, but I get great joy in being able to watch somebody really find that message that resonates with themselves, resonates with their team, and it means something. Sure. And right now, what you say has to mean something. Because as Brian says, as I say, there's too much noise out there. So if you can't capture my attention with something that's real and honest, that came from an intention that is good and true, shut your mouth.
That makes sense. That's really well said. And I like that. And so the 3 phases, and you're saying we're kind of between phase 1 and phase 2. It feels like, from what you were saying, that you could stay in phase 1 a little too long, maybe. Yeah. I feel like like you see the press conferences that the governors do, and obviously, the task force and all that. It seems like it can be too much at times, and too much of the exact same thing over and over. So are you telling CEOs, hey, less is more right now, or is it a case-by-case basis?
I think it's a case-by-case basis. I think there's a responsibility from leadership in government and healthcare to have guidance each day. I think people need comfort and guidance, and repetition does create comfort, but it also creates complacency, and it also creates a message that's not heard differently. So I do think that there are certain sectors that need to have these continual conversations. But again, not understanding what the intention and the information is each and every day, and how is it being heard on the other side. I mean, again, governors of these states in this country are exhausted. Yeah, and they're living this too. And they have families who are sick, and they have friends who are struggling. And, and so that's where I give a little bit of a pass with certain things, because we're all going through this as a species. Not just as a political party, not just as a state, not even just as a country. So it's a fine line, but again, if you lead with truth and integrity, and Brian spoke about it, and with some grace, I love the word grace, and grace isn't always pretty, but it's kind. Yeah. And that to me is the most important thing that I'm trying to say is you may have hard messages to deliver, but you can still be kind and graceful in the way that you deliver information that is not always fun.
Well, that's awesome. That's great feedback. Thank you very much. Brian, would you touch on that? You did a morning perspective the other day about the word grace. Just encapsulate that real quick, what your message was there.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in grace. I think that anybody that doesn't know the true definition of that word, you should go look it up in the dictionary and literally understand what it means, because I think that, in times like this, man, people use these times as a scapegoat to do things that are not okay, and they justify that behavior because they have a reason. The example that I'll use, and I'm not trying to call any companies out, but the week that all this happened, there was a major bank in the United States that announced that they were closing, X number of branches. And my wife said to me, man, I can't believe, this. And I said, that was happening before this. Yeah. That they're using that now, and they're going to fly it under the radar because the news cycle is not going to pick it up. It's not going to be a big story because everything else is going on. And so the whole idea of grace is that of respect. It's about care. It's about, realizing that people are human beings, and those leaders who understand human behavior, that understand human beings, that take the time to actually know their employees at some level and genuinely treat them like humans, not like a piece of equipment or a tool. Those are the leaders that will make it through this time. Some of the things that I wrote down while Kristen was talking is, I think the crisis introduces you to who you really are. What Warren Buffett's quote, which I've used over and over again since this happened, is nobody knows who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. And
Right.
What you're realizing right now, and Kristen called them, those who are faking it, but it's those people who are putting on a front. They're being stripped of that front right now. The fog is lifted, and you are left with what you have done every day that will serve you, or what you haven't done that is going to expose you. And so I think that every company, those behaviors, and Todd, you could speak to how it is inside of our company as well. It's like,
Yeah.
those things that we created as habits, very good disciplines, is what has served us through this time, and what has kept us inside of our values, has kept us calm during a storm, has kept us with the ship pointed straight in the direction that we're supposed to be going.
Mhm.
It's far from perfect, but those things that you have worked on, that you've built up muscle by repeating every single day, the disciplines that you've actually worked on, that is what sets you free. And those things that you have not worked on, that you said you were going to do, we all have them, you said you were going to do, you never took the time to actually implement, those are the things that you are realizing you didn't do, because the fog is lifted and you're left with what is real.
Right.
And, when you get to that point of leadership where the things that you have done consistently are the things that you can hang your hat on and be proud of. And those things that you haven't, those are learning experiences. But, going back to the word of grace, it's have some grace with yourself too, because there are lots of things that people are learning about themselves right now that may not be great. I've certainly learned some things since the beginning of this. There are things I wish I would have done. I wish I would have invested the time into, or the money into, as a company, to get things set up so that going through this, we would have, better results in certain areas. Those things are meant to be lessons, but don't beat yourself up. Take the lesson, have some grace with yourself, have some grace with your people, realize all the personal things that they're dealing with on top of the professional challenges that you have. And you'll end up being a better company as a result. You'll come together as opposed to falling apart. There's a million different phrases we could go through that people could resonate with right now, but I think the best way to look at it is that crisis will introduce you to yourself, both individually and as a company.
Amazing. That's great. Thank you very much. That nailed it. Well, this was awesome. This was time really well spent. Brian, where you're on the IT side of things here, do we have any questions that came in? I didn't put that out there at the beginning, so I can't see any of the comments. I'm not sure if anybody had any questions.
Let's see. Let me run through them real quick here. I think it's mostly just comments. A lot of great comments, though. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you found this valuable, by the way, guys, share this out to your own pages. I think there's a lot of business owners out there that are being tested right now, and even the very best can use different perspectives to grow. And that's part of the conversation today was being helpful, right? And being willing to take that coaching. And sometimes these little things, man, it's why I do, Kristen said it, why I do what I do is, man, if I could just impact one person, it's a blessing, man. It's a gift. And it's something that you literally become addicted to when you're able to help people, and those people help more people. It is genuinely the way that you change the world. And, so that's why we do what we do. And so if you guys found this to be valuable, please share it out to your pages. We'd love it if it reached some people that might need some help right now. So.
Awesome. Well said. Kristin, you want to give us a takeaway?
I'm grateful that the two of you trusted me to come on and join you today. It's a lot to introduce somebody new to your audience. And again, I think it's a testament that if we all work together, no one sits in in a dark room and doesn't share their ideas is a sad person. And I want to share what I've learned. I want, I'm not afraid to learn more. And I've learned so much just from talking with you guys for the past 2 calls that we've had. It gives me the lift that I need, because I get sick of hearing my own voice. And sometimes I wonder, I know I believe this, but when it's in your own head, you start to question if you're being valuable or not. So thank you for making me feel valuable and heard, and that you trusted me with this audience. It means a great deal.
Well, you bet. It was unbelievable, and I knew it would be. We're really great, cool experiment. I think maybe we'll do more of these, Brian. I don't know. Brian might be gone. I might be taking the show over. We might be running that way. I don't know. But you're amazing, Kristen. You really are. We can't thank you enough for your time. And people know, go to Kristen Daly Co. CO, right? KDalyco.com. There we go. I'm not a pitch man.
What are you trying to say? And does anyone give a shit? And I'm sure my face will pop up all over.
I think they give a shit. I just can't say it. That's the problem. That's the problem. But thank you. Can't thank you enough for your time. This was a lot of fun, and I hope a lot of people got great things out of it and a little bit of a boost. And we'll do it again soon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
And then look at the people who you spend the most time with in your life and figure out if that lines up.